What is going on, everybody? Welcome to The Common Coder. My name is Josh, and in this video, we're going to be talking about HTML. Specifically, what is HTML? What is it used for? Why do we care about it? Things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. On my screen here, you can see that I have this HTML code looking thing here, along with something else that looks very similar here on the end, with the question in the middle of what is HTML. And this fundamentally is what HTML is. Let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit. So HTML itself stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So it is a markup language, not a programming language. And the hypertext piece of that has to do with hyperlinks. So everybody's probably seen, if you clicked on this video, you clicked on a link of some sort. That is the hypertext piece of it, linking of documents across the web, so that way you can navigate around across the internet. However, HTML specifically is used to create those documents that are designed to be displayed in a web browser. And so I have structure documents highlighted here. Because that really is the essence of HTML. And documents can get confusing because when you go to a website, you don't think of documents, you think of pages, right? And the easiest way to think of this is the pages that you are viewing are essentially documents. So for example, if you go to Google Docs and we open up whatever this report template is here, you can see that there is a structure to this document, right? We have a title up here at the top. We kind of have like a subheading here. We have kind of a header information, it could be some kind of course name or whatever this might be. We have an image, we have a paragraph, we have a divider, we have like these little subheadings here, right? So there's a structure to this, and this structure is what we learned, when we do like our language arts classes and stuff like that, right? We use paragraphs, we use headings, we use indentations. HTML has a similar set of rules and a similar structure that you could use to represent a lot of this stuff in code. So if we jump back to this presentation here, you see specifically it is used to create documents designed to be displayed in a web browser. So at a very high level, you can create HTML documents, and everybody's familiar with documents like Word documents or Google Docs, right? Typically we'll have some type of file extension, and then you can open them up in a program like Microsoft Word or Google Docs. HTML is very similar in that regard. So we can create these HTML files and then load them up in the web browser and then see the output from the code that we put in. So we will get to a demo of that in just a little bit, but just know that HTML is used to structure content on the web, used to structure documents specifically designed to be displayed in a web browser. All right, so HTML is made up of tags, and these tags are used to create elements. So for example, here you can see that we have a body element here. And so the element is this entire thing made up of an opening tag, which looks like an opening angle bracket with the name of the tag you're going to be using, and then a closing angle bracket, and then some type of content inside. In this case, there's text, and then a closing tag, which looks the same except for the name of the tag is preceded by this /. So we have an opening tag, a closing tag, plus the content in the middle. All of these together create what we call elements. And HTML is made up of these elements, and these elements themselves are made up of tags. All right, so a little bit more on elements. HTML elements can contain text. So in this case, we have a P tag, which is a paragraph. Paragraph tag can contain some text. And you can see that same format here. We have opening angle bracket, name of the tag, closing angle bracket, content goes inside, and then opening angle bracket again, preceded with the /, name of the tag, and closing angle bracket. So almost all HTML elements will take this format, with a few exceptions, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. So in addition to text, HTML elements can contain other elements. So in this case, we have a form element. So a set of form tags here, opening tag, closing tag. Note the closing / here in front of the name of the tag. So inside of this form, we can have form elements like a button. So in this case, we have a button element. Same thing here, opening angle bracket, closing angle bracket. This has something else in here called an attribute, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Got some text related to the button that's going to be displayed, and then our closing tag. So we can have tags like a button nested inside of other tags, nested inside of other tags, nested inside of other tags. And all of this nesting and this structure of these tags is what makes HTML so powerful. You can structure things in a way that makes sense, and you can describe the content to the web browser of the things that you want displayed. Okay, so we talked about how normally most HTML elements will have an opening tag and a closing tag. Certain HTML elements can be self-closing. So this means that they don't contain any content. So a good example of this type of tag or element will be an image, right? So an IMG is an image. This is how you put an image onto a website. The image has what's called a source attribute or an SRC attribute set to the location of the image, but this tag itself doesn't actually contain any content. It doesn't contain any text, doesn't contain any additional elements. The element itself is responsible for rendering an image. So it doesn't make sense for this to have anything inside of it. So because of that reason, this tag can be self-closing. So you can see this, we have opening angle bracket, name of the tag, an attribute specifying the location of the image, and then it's self-closing. So we have this / closing tag, and this is the image element. So in the last few examples, we briefly saw attributes. HTML tags use these attributes to add context or adjust an element's behavior and display. You can do a lot of different things with attributes. Again, you can add context to an element. So for example, this body element, we can give it an ID attribute of a certain name. IDs are very specific. They're meant to be unique. And so for that reason, whenever you use something like an ID, that would need to be unique across your page. But all attributes, ID, source, bunch of other ones, they all take kind of the same format where you have attribute name equals and then attribute value. All right, here's some other examples of attributes. Up here, we have an image tag. So we saw that image earlier. Image tag has opening angle bracket with IMG, which is the name of the element or the name of the tag. We have the SRC or source attribute, and we're setting this equal to the location of the image relative to the location of the document itself. So source, this attribute tells the browser where to find the image. We have an anchor tag, which is a link. So an anchor tag or an anchor element has an href attribute, which tells the browser where the link goes. So if I wanted to put a link on my web page, I would create an anchor element starting with opening curly brace with an A, it stands for anchor, and then this href attribute with the location that this link is going to go to. HTML elements can also have multiple attributes, so you can pretty much have as many as you want or as many as the element supports. In this case, an anchor tag also has a target. So this target tells the browser how to open the link. So you can have it open in a new window or a new tab. You can have it take the place of the current document. So in this case, when you say target _ blank, in this case, this will open up in a new window or tab. And then inside of the actual element itself, you have the text that the link goes to. So this would create a link with the text of YouTube. And then when you click on it, it would actually go to www.youtube.com. So just an important note here, not all attributes are applicable to every element. So for example, if I tried to put a source attribute on an anchor tag, it's technically not valid. It wouldn't do anything. The page would still render fine, but if you were to put it inside of like an HTML validator or something like that, probably end up with some errors. So just keep that in mind. Not all attributes are applicable to every element, but certain ones are, right? So pretty much every element you can use an ID. Pretty much every element you can use something called a class, which is used for styling, and we'll talk about that in another video, but certain attributes are specific to a particular type of element. All right, so the important thing to understand about HTML is that it's only concerned with structure. And so structure is the structure of the document, right? What is this thing? Is it a paragraph? Is it an image? Is it a heading? Is it a header, which is like the header section of the page? Is it your main content? Is it a footer with some additional links and things like that, right? So it's only concerned with structure. It's not concerned with style or functionality, okay? So style is something that comes afterwards. Style is done by something called CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheet. And your functionality comes from JavaScript. And so that's actually a programming language that lets you add interactive functionality and interactive features inside of your web page or your web application, okay? So HTML structure, you can take the same structure and style it a bunch of different ways. You can take the same structure and add a bunch of different functionality to it, but these are completely separate concepts. So the structure, completely independent from style, completely independent from functionality. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and create our very first HTML document. So in order to do this, I'm going to use something called Visual Studio Code. This is a free code editor from Microsoft. You can download it from code.visualstudio.com, and you should have basically a download link as soon as you come here. We'll download it, install it onto your machine. There's other ways you can interact with this. There's actually a web version if you don't want to install anything. It's this vscode.dev, and essentially you get the full Visual Studio Code interface. This is pretty cool, but I want to kind of focus on the local development aspect of this without kind of leveraging some of the online tools. And that way you can see how all of these different pieces fit together in the grand scheme of things. All right, so what I'm going to do is actually open up a terminal because it's a little bit easier to create directories and things like that from the terminal. If you're on Windows machine, you can open up the command line. Pretty much works exactly the same way. Sometimes the commands are a little bit different, but for the most part, should be more or less the same. All right, so here in my terminal, I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a directory. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and list out my current directory. And we can see that I have a folder in here called code. And so this is where I like to kind of keep all my demos and my just sample proof of concept type stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and cd into that directory. So I'll say cd code. And then what I'll do here is go ahead and make a new directory using the makedir command, mkdir, and then specify the directory name I want to create, which is going to be called html/demo. All right, so once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and cd into that directory. So cd html demo. And then I'm going to basically use a shortcut to open Visual Studio Code, which is code dot. Now, if the code dot command doesn't work for you, you can open that directory by opening VS Code and clicking on File up here at the top, then clicking on Open Folder, and then finding the folder on your file system. Mine is right here. And then clicking open. All right, so once we've done that, we can go ahead and create our HTML file. Up here in the left Explorer panel, if I hover over the panel, I'll get these little buttons that pop up, and I'm going to use this one with the file with the little plus on it and click New File. And then I will create my new file, and I'm going to call it index.html. All right, so this index has a special meaning, and when we get into talking about servers and things like that, it'll make a little bit more sense. But index is basically the default file that a web server should return back to the browser when we make a request to it. So let's say I make a request to www.thecommoncoder.net. Inside of that folder that contains all the files for that site, it's going to load up an index.html file. So this is kind of the convention. This is your starting point of your application, if you will. All right, so what we're gonna do here is go ahead and create the most basic HTML document that we can create, and then talk about the pieces that are needed. So the very first thing that we need is something called a doc type. And so to create this, it's going to be an opening angle bracket, followed by an exclamation point, capital doc type. And you can see how Visual Studio Code is trying to help me out here. And then a space, and then HTML, and then a closing tag. And so this basically specifies to the browser what type of HTML document that it needs to load. And this isn't as much of a problem anymore, but in the earlier days of the web, when there was kind of competing specifications, there was the HTML3 and 4 spec, there was something called HTML. Now there's HTML5, which is basically just HTML now. And so it was important for the browsers to know what type of document it was working with, so that way it could parse it accordingly. So these days, pretty much what you'll encounter is just this doc type declaration with only HTML. So this needs to be up here at the top. And then once that's there, we can go ahead and create our HTML tag. And so this wraps the entire file and specifies this is the start of my HTML and the end of my HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and do another opening angle bracket. Go ahead and type HTML, closing angle bracket, and you see Visual Studio Code basically completes the closing tag for me. So we say opening angle bracket / HTML, closing angle bracket. All right. So within the HTML, it contains exactly 2 tags. One of them is called a head. So same thing here, opening angle bracket, head, closing angle bracket, and then there's a corresponding closing tag. So you notice a pattern here, opening tag, closing tag, opening tag, closing tag. And inside of the head, there's only a minimal amount of information that needs here. So one of them is a tag called meta. And this basically specifies the character encoding that is used by this web page. Pretty much the standard is something called UTF-8. So we're just going to go ahead and set that here. So we'll say charset UTF-8. All right. Now the meta tag doesn't have a closing tag. And per HTML5 specs, I actually don't have to include the closing slash here. I usually do it just out of habit, but it's technically valid if I leave it off. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and leave it, but just know that you can go ahead and remove that in this particular case. Next thing is going to be something called a title. And so this is actually the first thing that the user will be able to see in terms of what we're programming or what we're marking up here on our web page. And so for this, go ahead and start typing title. Close that. Visual Studio Code is going to add the closing tag for me. And then within this title tag, I'm going to call this HTML demo. All right, and what this is the text that will appear up here on your tab. So if we were to look at this web page, I'm going to go ahead and right click on it and click inspect. Up here at the top, we can see inside of the head, there is that meta charset UTF-8. So there's that, a bunch of other stuff. And somewhere in here, we should get to the title. Here it is, Visual Studio Code, code editing redefined. And I can actually double click in here and change some of this if I want to, add some exclamation points. And then now if I hover over this title, notice those exclamation points there. Okay, so this title is what makes the text appear here in the tab. All right, so going back to Visual Studio Code, that will be the title. And this is pretty much all that we need inside of the head. Now, if we had styles we were loading in, we would want to go ahead and include those here. If we had some JavaScript that we wanted to run before the code on the page was loaded, we can do that as well. But for the most part, this is kind of the minimal amount of information that you'll need here in the head. So the other tag that goes inside of HTML is the body tag. And this marks the start of the visible portion of the web page. So if I will start my body tag, opening angle bracket, body, go ahead and close that off. Notice the pattern here again. So this HTML basically contains two additional elements. One is the head, one is the body. And then inside of the body, I'm going to go ahead and use something called an H1, which is a heading level 1. So you think of your top level heading. It's basically the main focus. What is this document about? You can kind of think of it almost the same as your title in a way. Obviously they can differ, but it's basically like, what is this page about? What is, this is the most important piece of information to tell the users of that page what it is. So in this case, it's a demo. So let's just say hello from HTML. All right, and so with this structure in place, we have created a valid HTML document, and we can go ahead and view this inside of a browser. And so to do that, all we have to do is right click, and I have an extension here that says open in default browser. So if we go to our extensions tab over here in VS Code, which is this one right here with the little blocks, if I scroll down, I had installed this extension here called open in browser. And so pretty useful. There's a bunch of different extensions in here, but you can see this is called open in browser. So if I go back to my file, click on my files, I'm going to go ahead and right click open in default browser. And now if I go to my browser, you can see here is my title that says HTML demo and my hello from HTML page. And so this is all that it takes to create a simple HTML document. Now there's a lot more that we can do. We can add styling, we can add links, we can add additional pages. All of that kind of stuff is things that we'll be exploring here on this channel. So if you're interested in exploring the web and learning about the web, learning how these different pieces work together, definitely consider subscribing because we're going to be talking about all of that stuff. But at a basic level, here is our hello from HTML. I'm going to just make a quick modification. I'm going to go ahead and add a paragraph tag here at the end, and I'll just call this please like and subscribe. Go ahead and save that. Go back to my browser and refresh, and there we go. Please like and subscribe. All right, so that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, anything at all, please drop those down in the comments. Like I said, definitely consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content like this. We're going to explore some of the basics of HTML. We'll touch on CSS, we'll touch on JavaScript, and then we're going to basically kind of go into just different topics related to all three of those things and just explore different ways of doing things on the web. So if that sounds interesting to you, if you want to stick around, learn some stuff, I would definitely appreciate if you like, subscribe, and share the video. All right, well, that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. I hope you learned something new today, or at the very least that you were mildly entertained. So until next time, I hope you all take care, and I will see you in the next video.